Remember.
Can I get a mover and seconder to reconvene? Moved by Councillor Deal, second by Deputy Mayor, that the Council of the Municipality of Huron East reconvene into open session at 3:02 p.m. All in favor? And motion carries. And reporting out, council went into a closed session to discuss personal matters about identifiable individuals and provide direction to staff in regards to fire service compensation. Number 7, reports and recommendations of municipal officers, and Brad's got the floor for the operational budget.
All right. I'll go on to the next slide there, Tess, please. There we go. So this budget that's presented for you, the draft operational capital budget, basically is comes out of the decision that council gave back in December 20th, I believe, was in for our capital financial strategy. So at that time, council agreed to sort of go with what we call the no debt deferral with no debt going forward kind of option. And that included deferring some capital equipment for PW, 2 trucks and the tandem. On a condition that we would order the tandem now because there's 18 to 24 month lead time. So that's been done. So the truck has been ordered, so it will come in 2025. So we deferred about $610,000 of capital. And then we looked at some of the recreation projects and we looked at trying to defer some of them. Based upon those kind of deferrals, we were looking at roughly about a 4.2% capital levy in 2024. Conveniently fits in exactly with what your asset management plan says in terms of what your percentage capital levy should be. Based upon kind of the operating, I kind of throw the number out there right now, based upon your operating and capital budget, we're looking at about 11.8% levy increase. That's a levy, okay, not tax rate, that's levy. And that's pretty close to what we estimated when we brought you the financial strategy options, right? So that was a big bang on to what we estimated. So some of the things, next slide, some of the things that we deferred. We deferred the roof replacement at the new shop, the old office part of the shop part, the old office up there. So that was $45,000. We spoke about the PW truck replacements. The dressing rooms at the National Recreation Center, we were going to upgrade one dressing room and then go to the other one. Now we just roll them in, we'll just do both of them in the same year. C4 tennis courts, we deferred that to 2026. Looking potentially at maybe some funding streams alternatively for that. The Brussels Library HVAC system, we looked at deferring it until 2026. It's a nice to have, want to have, but not necessarily critical. The Cranbrook Hall roof replacement, we deferred it. Hoping that's still a good decision, but that was $50,000. I know there's some leaking issues kind of going on right now at Cranbrook Hall. And then the Seaforth Fire Hall upgrades, we put $50,000 in there to do some upgrades to what's called the radio room, that front room you come into, as well as do some painting and potentially paint the roof, that part of it. So kind of spruce it up a little bit, do some maintenance. So Seaforth firefighters are really wanting to do that, but looking at alternatives to try to defer things. That was put forward.
Brad, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't want to break your train of thought, but I don't know what all were going to be the plans in that room itself. How much of that work could John actually do for us? He's done a lot of office work here and stuff, and he's going to cost us less than a general contractor for sure.
In terms of the renovations inside, certainly John could do it. You're still gonna have material costs, all that type of thing, flooring costs. It's not gonna be cheap, so you'd still have some money there. Time wise, yeah, it would be his time, but you'd still have, I'd still say you'd probably be looking at $5,000-6,000 for material costs at least.
Okay, thank you.
The bigger cost of that $50,000 was really to do the painting on the exterior and get it cleaned up. A couple of things that have kind of come up since December, the new reshop heaters, so they're basically on their last legs. So we kind of need to replace them. So our plan is to replace those heaters and then take the ones that are still operating there, move them down to the Winthrop shops so that they can be put in there, because the Winthrop shops currently operating off of one heater, the other one doesn't work and we can't get parts for it anymore. So that's the strategy we've kind of implemented here, is to kind of roll them through. So that came forward, and then I found out this week, last week. Last week I found out that the parks truck didn't pass the safety. That's the truck that does the tank on it, that waters the flowers, and then they pull the trailer to mow all the greens. So that truck didn't pass the safety, so. Didn't pass the safety because it got holes. That's how old it is. We had a conversation with Public Works about potentially replacing one of their trucks and then moving it down, and we just kind of ultimately said, no, we just need to get a good state of good truck for the parks, because we're trying to, before grass cutting was kind of done C4 for after, and then Brussels did the road, we're trying to team it all up to be done as a universal so that we can roll around and kind of hit things quicker and faster. So best to have a good truck. The tank creates some consideration of 3/4 tons that are the one that we would need to be able to carry the load of that. I think historically at one time, you had that tank on a 1/2 ton and then it wore it down because it's not properly loaded, it's too much water on small trucks. So 3/4 tons will be added. And then Gray Shop indicated that they needed some more gear rack for the bunker gear. So we added that in as well. So these are kind of last minute things kind of came in the last week or so. So we added those in. I'm happy to answer questions through it or.
No, sorry, Councilor Sherrick.
You know, one of the things we talked about last time too, that was potentially in the budget, whether it was in or out, was the request that the Brussels Fire Department had for paving an additional parking lot.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. That's in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see it up there. That's why I wondered.
Councilor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not clear, Mr. McRoberts. Are we getting a new truck for Public Works and moving one to yard maintenance, or are we getting them a brand new truck?
We're getting them a brand new truck.
So a 3/4 ton would be what, 50 or 60? 70.
Fully equipped with all your markers and all that in it.
Yeah, and electric too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you
thank you.
So impacts the operational budget include, I haven't got there yet. Come on. There we go. So some of the things that have impacted the operational budget, obviously cost of living increases, so we kind of applied that to those cost centers, those cost items, line by line, at the 3.8%. I believe going forward, we use 3% as sort of a guide in the other years. But we use 3.8% unless we had other indications that there was a greater increase. We've got our compensation review that's being incorporated in there. We're going into our first year of a full implementation of our succession plan. So we implemented half of it last year, so now it's the full implementation. There's insurance cost increases, okay, so they were probably in that 11% range. Health and benefit costs have increased a little bit based upon our consortium cost breakdown. There's a few other things that we've got from a revenue standpoint. Some of our revenues have increased as well. So we have our OMPF funding. So it went from 1.153 million to 1.167. So, $12,000 increase there. So not significant, but at least it's on the increase side of it as opposed to the decrease side of it. OCIF funding, which is basically your road funding, that comes through the province. I believe that's the province, right? Yeah, Ontario. 915 is what we had last year. Now we're up roughly about 100,000 on that one. So that's
Councilor
good.
Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Brad, did you know we were getting well over 100,000 increase in that before you set the budget? Or did that come after you set the budget?
It's incorporated in the budget. That we
So you knew beforehand?
Well, it'll be for this year's budget, so we
Yeah.
know what we're getting this year. And those numbers are given to us basically at the tail end or the beginning of the year. So we do now know what 2024 contribution will be for OMPF, OCIF, and gas tax.
Right, so,
Okay.
but where I'm going is that if you didn't know we were getting well over $100,000 increase, shouldn't our 11.8 come down to 10?
No, because we actually project what the increases are gonna be, even though we don't know what they are, we make guesses, estimates.
Okay,
Yeah, so we incorporated something into it,
thank you.
whether it's bang on the dollar, I couldn't tell you that about, but we have incorporated increases. Gas tax revenue, 302 to 311. And then we get the provincial aggregate resource funding, that's the money we get from all the different quarries in the municipality, there's a royalty fee that goes to municipalities. So that's increased marginally as well. We've also increased our user fees, so all the user fees for other fees and charges bylaw have been increased, and we've incorporated, general estimates on those as well. Some of the decisions we made in 2023 that are being incorporated in this budget. The Gray Fire Department ventilation fan, that was a $6,000 capital requirement. So we incorporate that in 2024. The compensation review for all staff, including the fire service. So what recommendations we make for the fire service have already been incorporated in that budget. Full implementation of the succession plan. Additional funds, if council recalls, we did put additional funds in this year to bring all the bunker gear at all the stations up to date. We had a lot of expired sets that were we weren't catching up, so we just sort of said, let's get caught up and then we'll continue going forward. So that includes bunker gear, helmet, boots, some balaclavas, things like that. Principal and interest on the SCBA financing through trust, we're assuming we're gonna be able to pay that off by 2027. So it's kind of a short, Stacy doesn't like when I use the term short-term financing, but we're basically just funding it for a short period of time until we can get it paid off. I know council's a little twingy about debt, but we can do it through the trusts. And alternatively, if the trusts are willing to have that shorter duration of a funding stream, then we could probably use some of our water and sewer reserves on that short duration as well.
Councilor Sharkey.
Didn't we have the scuba? Didn't we have that money in the 2023 budget?
Yeah, but we're borrowing for short-term financing for it, yeah. For the SCBA here.
But we never used it in 2023.
Well, we didn't borrow for it because we didn't spend it yet, so that's still part of 2023 strategy, right?
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, you mentioned through you to Brad. Brad, you mentioned a couple times about succession planning, and we're about a year into the first phase of it. I'm gonna get a report back on how that's working out.
Good, yeah.
At some point in time, would be nice to hear from people that were involved and how it's working.
Okay, yeah, I could do that.
And
Yeah.
on the year, and if I could, if you may, just right back to the truck that would be required for the watering and stuff, either
Yep.
through to you or to Barry. Did you investigate like a 1-ton truck? How many 1-ton trucks do you have now, Barry, in your?
We have 4.
Going together, because I just wonder about this 3/4-ton truck, what would you use it for in the wintertime then? Like, would it just be sitting?
Actually, it'd be the rec department, that'd be utilizing that truck more so than us. It could be used for a number of things, like we've got the 3 facilities now that, you've got to look after. So it'd probably be running back and forth to Brussels and Banastra. You could almost, even look at, in a planning stage, for plowing the front end of it and do maybe some of the parking lots.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Sharkey.
Back to the scuba thing there, we haven't done yet the fire review meeting, but I'm not sure what's gonna come out in that meeting, but there's been a question whether or not we needed to even purchase as many as we wanted to.
And certainly we'll go through that process. Brad will make his recommendation to you guys as a council, and then you can decide
Okay,
how that flows, right? Whether you do it or not do it at the end of the day. If
So-
you do it, it'll be through financing. If you don't do it, then obviously you'll need financing.
so the way you've got it set up there, you're gonna Stacy now, if you do end up doing it, you are gonna go finance it through the trust?
we'd be happy to, if the trust are still willing to. My biggest concern is that we'd like to also pay it off as quickly as possible. The trust may go, and it's not worth it around 2 years from what.
Before we carry on, Deputy Mayor, do you want to make your motion for the report?
Yes, I would, please.
And do I have a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Fisher. And all in favor? Oh, sorry, there was a report for an update on our succession planning, how it's going along. It was carried.
Thanks, Mayor, for making sure we keep the housekeeping going.
Clerk gets that credit.
And then lastly was the transfer of roadside mowing as an in-house service, and that was ultimately to lead towards a cost saving. We talked about this on a regular basis, the operational deficits that we had in 4 cost centers, the Brussels Cemetery, the BNGC, the SDCC, and the Huron Fire Service. Being the fact that we're already at a fairly good impact on 2024 operating costs, staff are still recommending that we put it off again until subsequent years to start trying to pay some of that down. You know, there's an opportunity potentially too, once we get our working capital back in place, that we could use some of that working capital to kind of break those costs off as well. But right now, we've got the working capital to do that. Just
Councillor Sharp.
So are we gonna be going through these sheets?
I'm just doing my presentation and you guys can ask all your questions. I'm not gonna go line by line.
Because we have a number of questions on the sheets, and one of them is about the deficit. So like, the question I had was, when you go to the BMG, we had predicted or forecasted a deficit of 22,000, right? But in 2024, we're forecasting a $978,000 deficit.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, because we had spent money on the arena renovation already, but we're not receiving the funding from the donations or the pledges until 24, 25, 26. We are deferring that deficit because for the renovation based on the fact that we have not received funds to cover it yet.
So you'll see as you go through the next years, you'll see as the pledges
should go
come in,
down.
that deficit goes down.
Yeah.
Councillor Fisher.
To that matter that Councilor Chartrand brought up, then that
78,000.
thank you, are we incurring interest costs on that, or is that coming out of the fundraising?
It's not, we're not tracking interest right now, so it's coming, we've cash flowed it based on our working capital. So we're not per se borrowing those costs, right? So we're just using our working capital, the cash flow, the fundraising portion of those dollars. So let's just say it's the 978. It's not quite all the 978, we'll just say it's not. So we cash flowed that, we paid for the work, but as the pledges come in, we'll reduce that deficit.
Right, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, are we paying interest on $900,000 right now?
I mean, well, when we go over our overdraft, we pay interest when we go into our overdraft, but that's a normal cycle with the municipality. Like that's because you did the ROI bylaw at the beginning of the year, the overdraft, 3 million.
So even if we're not paying interest on it, Bob, we're not collecting interest by having it in the bank either.
That's where I was going next, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
So one way or another, it is costing us a little to help finance the donations we will be receiving from the public. But that's the lesser of two evils rather than having to pay for and budget it ourselves.
Thank you.
In terms of the capital funding, I'll just kind of go through this fairly quickly. It is on part of that one table there. I just kind of wanted to make sure that as part of the sort of presentation side of it, there's a good understanding of what we're spending in terms of capital. So we're looking at roughly about $5.2 million worth of capital spending. Included in that, we're doing, from a road standpoint, we're doing Sports Drive. That's a reconstruction on Sports Drive. We got 2 bridges that we're doing, M28 and M13 on Canada Company Road for about $440,000. Barry might be able to speak to what specifically each of those bridge work is. You know, for M20.
They'll be on Cabot Company Road, in preparation for future paving, so we'll do the bridges first, and I do believe Cabot Company is in our 5-year plan next year or the year after.
What specifically are you?
We'll be extending the bridge deck and, block. So right now, they're narrow structures, for the road allowance.
And then we have all our municipal drain assessments, so this isn't the work to do the municipal drains, this is what the municipality gets assessed based upon the drain. We got 14th concession, the Bailey drain, the Baker drain, the Charters drain, the Charters H drain, and the Kennedy drain. So that's the work that our drainage superintendent's anticipating to be assessed in 2024. In terms of some of the water and sewer systems, from a sanitary standpoint, there isn't any in-road works, but we do have some roof replacements for about 61,000. I think there's 3 separate buildings that need to have roof work done on. In terms of the water system, we've got a roof replacement over in Menastra, I believe it is, for 60,000. And then Sports Drive, we're replacing the water main for about 411. There was a PW equipment. We included the roadside rotary mower at 25. That's to implement our in-house roadside mowing. And then we had a new shop. I got cedars in there, it should be heaters. Had the new shop for 30,000. In terms of park recreation, fairly extensive list of work here, from our roof replacement at the SDCC. We've got a dehumidifier replacement that we need to do this year. And we have a ceiling beam refinishing, so we'd like to kind of keep that tied in with the roof replacement. The BMGC brine pump, so that's the pump that circulates the brine through the refrigeration system, that needs to be replaced. There's a fairly significant electrical panel replacement that we need to do on the older portion of the building. For 125, the Russell pool filters and pool deck needs to be replaced. The deck is it's cracked and it's heaved. It's not very safe, and I believe there's some plumbing issues below that deck that we need to deal with sooner rather than later. So we kind of kept it in 2024 as a priority. The wall lights replacement, I know there was some concern by part of that's being funded by the local group. The reality is we're actually undertaking an engineering assessment of those lights. The first light that collapsed and fell at the base below ground. So these are concrete footings that are below grade with the steel stands basically stuck into the concrete. So it broke off basically above the concrete but below the ground. So we don't know, looking at the condition of the stands right now, just visually, we don't know what the condition below is. Barry, this folks and our our engineer is going to go and look and do an assessment up there. So as long as, if his conclusion comes back that they're structurally not safe, we have no choice but to replace them or shut the park down. At least the lights down. And just tear them down. So I've left it in. Potentially, if it comes back from that engineering assessment, says, you know, we're good for a year or two, it's not going to be 10 years, it's going to be a very short period of time. We can maybe spread it out a little bit. If we have to go forward and do it this year, I'm kind of recommending that council move forward and replace them. Or remove them and just not have lights, which I don't think will be well received. But if the group can't fundraise to raise that amount of money, then they would just have to fundraise over a period of time, whatever we agree upon, whether that's 2-3 years, to be able to raise those dollars. Kind of one of those things where we've got to that point where we just got to do it. It's our liability. If they fall on somebody, it's not their liability. Seaforth Optimus Park, they've been looking at, they're not replacing the stands, they're looking at just replacing the lights. So there was a suggestion at the December meeting about maybe using some of the green energy fund or our solar revenues to put in LED lights up there. So that's being proposed for 2024. Our Director of Community Service has applied for a grant through the Trillium program to do those upgrades at that Quebec public park over in Astra. So it's 100,000, but it's only $15,000 of our cost. To do that project, if we're successful. If we're not successful, we won't do the project and we'll just defer it off to a subsequent year if you apply. Now we got a parks mower replacement at 25 and then that parks truck replacement at 75. Next page,
Deputy Mayor.
administration, we've been doing a bit of office renovations and.
The second, Brad.
Oh, sorry.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, has there been any sort of, communications and partnerships set up or even looked at as far as the Seaforth Arena? And you mentioned the Walton Park as well. And we reached out to them, and the other one was the Brussels Pool. Normally the Brussels Lions always spend a bit of money there at the pool.
Yeah.
Has there been any sort of communication with any of them groups to see if there was any buy-in as far as fundraising themselves to help put some money towards?
I can talk about them each specifically. I know there's been some conversations with the Walton group in terms of their fundraising lights. In terms of the C4 roof, it's a roof kind of moving towards.
Yes.
There was a conversation here with council that
Yes,
council and maybe would gather some service clubs together to kind of have a conversation
Yeah.
about a potential fundraising campaign. I don't think that's been coordinated out yet. And then sort of, Brussels. We can certainly have a conversation with the Lions. The Lions does a lot of fundraising to actually support operational costs, so they discount the fees.
Yes.
So I think that's their focus. Whether or not they'd be interested in putting some dollars towards it, I haven't had those conversations.
because in the past, they were good at donating some money towards sort of capital or capital improvements like that. They were, I just think it's worth the ask anyway. And the other one was the Seaforth Optimus Park too.
All right, they're already contributing as part of that program.
Okay.
Like it's a 50-50 split with them.
I just think I think it's a must that we at least reach out, ask and see.
Councillor Deal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back the last slide there. At the bottom, you mentioned the mower again. That's the roadside mower.
That's actually the parks mower. That's the.
Okay, that's the park mower. Okay, this parks truck, is this the same truck we already spoke of?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, 170 and 175.
I thought they were both 75.
Oh, on the last slide, it was 70. Or one of the other slides, we talked,
Okay.
I'm sure it was 70.
Go back.
Maybe I'm wrong. Could be wrong. Oh, you're right.
75.
Mark that down.
It's quite possible I could have slipped something there. In terms of other capital funding, we've got some office renovations and furniture requirements here. John's telling me that the HVAC for the back here is on its last legs. So he's included that. And also the roof at the back here needs to be, I think one of the roofs there, I think it's just the one behind here. Needs to be replaced, and he's got estimates that for 80,000. Building department's looking at trying to acquire a large plan scanner, so that'll be through the building department reserves. That's trying to assist us to go through a bit more of a digital format. Part of our asset management planning moving forward, there's a software, 51,000, it's a big ticket price for it, and it's something we need to be able to continue moving forward with asset management planning. And then we've got sort of random computer replacements on a regular schedule that we can do through that process. Economic development, Carolyn's already been in front of you in terms of the wayfinding signage, that's sort of phase one step of it, so that's 75,000, but don't forget, there's 2/3 of that's coming from both, hopefully the county and which program of it? RTO board. Okay, so I'm not giving you what the net amount here, this is the total cost of what we're spending, not what our cost is. And then on the Huron East Fire Service, we got our bunker gear. That was agreed upon, we got some gear racks for the Gray and Brussels. We've got HVAC for Brussels, that's to put some ventilation system in on the, I'll call it the meeting room side of things. We got lifting bags, so all three stations have these lifting bags that they use when there's a motor vehicle accident or when they need to lift something off. All I know is that they're really old. They continue to use them, but I'm very concerned that one of them potentially could go, and if they went, it could be both risks to the public or the victims, but more importantly, well, not more importantly, but certainly as well as firefighters, it could get kind of debris that comes off those bags when they explode. So they're just pressurized balloons, basically. So we're looking at trying to replace them. There's discussions about getting some accountability boards. I'm not the expert on that, but I understand what they are is those are what they track on who's where on a scene. Okay, in terms of who, so they have that information station, but they also track it on a scene. To know what firefighters are there, so they can kind of track who's going in and out, so they sort of, you can account for everybody at the end of the day. There's your Brussels parking lot expansion, so that's an estimate coming through. That number is based upon what the contractor Dom has offered as a change order amount. My recommendation is that we use that for a dollar figure. But I think between ourselves and maybe Barry's resources, we might be able to do that a little bit less expensive. We can't do the pavement, but we can certainly do some of the prep work. So I've included that for now. Depends on what we had decided to do with our fire chief position. I've left our cost share for the fire chief vehicle. We have our ventilation fan, our SCBA compressor fill station at Seaford. The other two stations have compressor fill stations that are suitable for the new tanks. And then we got equipment decontamination. We were trying to stagger it. So Seaford was scheduled to get their equipment this year. Gray was to be next year, but when I think about it, it's probably from a health and safety standpoint, it's important for us to make sure that we get the proper decontamination here and there. The Gray right now is using what I would call a heavy duty washer. Takes about 3-4 hours per, well, 3 hours, I think, only for each bunker gear. And then, of course, they rotate them through. It takes like days to get through everybody's bunker gear. And then they just hang it out there and let it dry and sort of on chairs and in the meeting room. And so it takes like a week to process this. They don't clean them very well. The actual proper equipment is actually an extractor. It'll take more of the moisture out of the bunker gear and allow it to dry. And then there's this drying equipment, I think. It's kind of like your boot dryer. You put the bunker gear on it and it blows the air through it to dry it faster.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you, to Brad. Brad, you've mentioned, and we talked about before about the fire chief vehicle, and you've mentioned about maybe an electric truck of some sort. What about an option of going to a hybrid vehicle instead? Because you can probably get one of them for 2/3 of that cost, maybe even less.
Yeah.
It still fits your green idea that you're after. My concern is we buy the truck and we get a fire chief, well, then we have to install a charging station at his or her house.
Yeah.
And then what happens if in 6 months' time or even a year's time, he or her leaves the job, then, I mean, we're out that and we gotta reinvest that again. So, I mean, I like the idea of having a green vehicle, but I just wonder, why don't we go 2/3 of the way and get a hybrid? I think we could check that off and, you know, like a Chevy Blazer or Ford, whatever, but you know what I mean? I just think we could save some money there.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have to be looking at a charging station as well.
In the end of the day, our cost, Huron's cost for that vehicle is pretty nominal. It works out to being, you know, $10,000 or $12,000 is actual impact on the levy. So the savings is marginal. I don't disagree with what we could look at. I think it's better to kind of say, what's the big plan and what does that look like? We're not the only decision makers in the process as well, so we have to have those consultations with our here as well. Okay, any more questions there?
Councilor McGrath.
Just then, that's coming from a business point of view, so I have a conflict, but I don't. Because I'm retired, well, not really. We're talking about HVAC, plumbing and stuff. Do we pursue pricing jobs from other? Because we have Matthew John out here, my son, we have Seaforth Plumbing, we have what's that?
Holman as well.
Jeff Holman at a place in town, we have Scott Townsend in Vanastra, or do we just go to the one guy and say, go ahead?
Generally try to get 3 quotes.
Cause it's just, I mean, if it's, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 is one thing, but I mean, you're talking 28 grand there.
Yeah.
And, I just think we should be, just because they're all taxpayers, right? They should, the bigger stuff, they should have a kick at the cat. If they miss, they miss, but if they don't, I think it pretty much aggravates them that they didn't even get asked to submit a price.
We typically do, sometimes we even struggle sometimes getting someone to actually submit quotes. That's, it's a random battle, but.
I think your bigger items like that, you wouldn't get it for your smaller stuff, but your HVAC for your town. Even the $30,000 for your shed back there, that's somebody that's local. Yeah,
We typically get prices for budget purposes, but that doesn't mean that that's as far as we're gonna go, it'll be that procurement.
well, I would highly recommend that you submit prices. If they don't return, so be it. I mean, we do it for a lot of other things where we send out quotes, if you will, we would be to gender certain things, especially with the arena there, that's pretty pricey. Yeah, that's all.
I want to give, there are some options council can consider. So I kind of, there's a couple, so we could defer the ceiling beam refinishing. You know, it's something we need to do fairly close to when the roof's done. We don't want to leave it too long, but it's something we could defer a year. And then the Brussels Fire Hall parking expansion, we could potentially defer that a year. So those are a couple options. That, let's just say that it reduces your levy by 1% this year. You have to remember though, every time you reduce the levy this year, it doubles what you're gonna have to increase next year. Because we're using the reserve dollars that you're contributing in 2023, you're gonna reduce that number, then they're gonna double it up to catch up again in 2025. So it, you know, it's an option, but recognize what impact it potentially might have. So we roll back into what we said in terms of that first slide. We said roughly about a 4.8% capital levy in 2025. If we deferred it this year, you'd be looking at a 6.8% levy, capital levy increase, just for capital. So kind of it stresses the importance of kind of keeping consistent on your reserve contributions and gradually ramping them up over time. Deferring things on a reserve contribution can have an impact, a fairly significant impact, really, quite frankly, on your next year's levy increase. Anyway, that's my presentation. So with that, I'll open the floor. Stacy and I are here. All the department heads are here to answer any questions on the specific concept. Thank you for your time.
Councilor Neil.
Just a question, with regards to the roof renovation as well as the beam refurbishing. The duration of those projects, would they have it so that the hall could not be used, or sorry, the arena floor surface could not be used for a period of time? My concern would be is that if you deferred the refurbishing of the beams, that may take you out for another season, depending on how long the project takes.
We would probably try to schedule that work. I mean, the reason why I kind of threw as an option before, because if the roof project's ongoing, we may not want to be in there in that work area, trying to refinish the beams, and we were trying to do it in summer, obviously. So you might automatically have to defer it to 2025. I think that's kind of what we're getting at.
Yeah, you may end up with back-to-back projects that affect your rentals.
We would try to do them in the, I'll call it the off season, I guess,
Yeah.
so that would not affect you guys' time.
Yeah.
Councilor Deal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just got a few quick questions. In the 5-year budget, fire chief, line 6025. Why is there decorative lights?
No, it's just an incorrect name. It comes across the way the system's set up, and the 5-year budget forecast was in the report last year. So some of the titles aren't coming across properly, I don't have to bought a couple and, you know.
Okay, so what is that then?
What is it?
Expensive. They go.
It's one of the drawbacks of the system we use called FMW, and it sort of has general accounting nomenclature that gets associated with that number. And it doesn't transfer very well between some departments. Yeah, so it's not decorative, it's just.
Okay, I'll wait until you continue.
She'll look it up and then we can go through that.
Okay, well, the next one is in the CBO. 3508. Minor hockey.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch of those. Same.
Yeah.
Speak up, please.
It's the same issue. Alvin, I emailed you back on, that's the one that Alvin caught and they are. Different ones.
Small plastics on that. Yeah, they.
I've got a few of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
so that's why I was just wondering what they actually wear. but-
Yeah.
You know that you can just use those.
I can, but, I have to go back to her. That one,
What number was that down in?
so for
3508?
that
Yeah,
one, 3508 is sidewalks and cafe permits, 3509 on the building inspector, which is the next page, is septic inspections. 3510 on the building inspector page is planning application comments, and 3511 on the building inspector page is property inquiries.
I'm sorry I didn't catch all those, I'll just look through the rest of them here.
Let me get the fire.
You said building inspector. There's 3509, 10, and 11.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just gave you those three.
Okay, and what were they? So what were they supposed to be, I should say?
3509 is septic inspections.
Okay,
3510 is planning application comments.
okay.
And 3511 is property inquiries. So these sports teams are not what this.
No.
It was really hard to figure that out. I want to do some rearranging on our general ledger, so it fix all these issues, but that's gonna be, that's gonna take time.
Okay, I think we've caught them all then.
Okay,
Dr.
I didn't get you
Sharp.
the fire, I didn't get you that one yet. I just need to know the number on the fire.
6025. It's the fire chief. 5-year budget.
Flashing green lights down Main Street.
Light everything, okay?
Send it to the next.
Maybe people would pay attention then.
That's fire prevention officer.
Did I hear that, fire prevention officer?
Oh, fire prevention?
Hey, Counselor Sharpton was next.
Yes, I have a number of questions. I spent a couple of hours with Counselor Fisher to go over these line by line items, so. So on the first page of the 5-year budget forecast. I think I know one of the answers, so. Prior year deficit, in 2023, we said we had budgeted to come in at 621,000 deficit, but we only came in at 67,000.
Those 2023 numbers are all preliminary. They're not complete yet. That number has not yet been adjusted.
Okay, but then we forecasted 1,000,003 in 2024 deficit.
Which includes the, what we spoke about the
Brussels.
Brussels. Yeah, this is a total of all of them.
Yeah, okay. And farther down, under capital, in 2023, we forecasted to spend 5,600,000. But we spent 9 million.
That's because the Brussels arena was budgeted in prior years. And we did most of the work in 2023. Or, right?
That's why it's $4 million more than what we had forecasted.
Pretty much, because most of the Brussels arena was budgeted in 22, wasn't it?
Okay. Bear with me here. We got our notes on here, in economic development, we had a question where this transfer from and transfer to reserves. So in 2023, we transferred to reserve 40,000 and we transferred from reserve 30. But our question is, in 2024, we're planning on transferring 90,000.
You have to look at the top and that includes your grant money that's coming in, so 50,000 of that is the budgeted grants. Income at the very top of that page, you have a provincial grant for 25. And a county grant for 25, that goes to reserves and then it comes out to be used.
Just it jumped out at us to go that far.
Yeah, it's the same with 2025, that includes grants, but then you see 26, it drops down again, because we have no projected grants coming.
And, one of the questions when we went through green energy and anywhere in here, unless we missed it, I don't see anywhere in here where it shows vibrancy.
The vibrancy fund income is in,
That's fine.
general revenues, it's under,
So it's not in green energy.
no, it's not in green energy,
Okay,
Separate shares.
yeah.
no issues in the water systems.
Yeah, it's in.
We just never noticed it. No issues in the cemetery, we're just dying to get in there. Vanessa early childhood.
Get to that.
Which page is that one?
There's no page number
Oh,
on
you
it.
don't have page numbers?
It's the package is how you deliver it to us,
Yeah.
whatever.
We'll work through it, yeah. We'll get there.
I got it.
Couple questions, so under 3,300, where it says other municipalities.
Yeah.
We budgeted 145,000 to bring in revenues, but we only brought in 36,000.
On the first line, now there's some allocation issues there, so if you look at the total, we budgeted for 303,000, but we actually brought in 30 in total, it's
So
all,
why does it say 145?
It's just how we allocate it and how it gets recorded in the actual.
yeah,
Depending upon most of the funding coming through county for the most part.
Well, it's very confusing when you have the one line item that says we budgeted 145 and we actually only took in 36.
and actuals are preliminary, so they're gonna change.
Yeah, down here. And wages in Vanastra, I'm assuming it's got to do with the our evaluation that we did for wages, but I mean, that's a gigantic jump to go from 540,000 to 783,000.
Yeah, that has to do with not only the pay equity or pay increase, that has to do with the fact that all the part-time employees are now full-time employees at 40 hours a week, where they weren't working 40 hours per week. So that was to alleviate, and Lisa can probably speak to it further, scheduling issues and to make sure that we have a full staffing comprehensive.
When you look at the bottom line for salaries and benefits there, like we went from 684,000 to $1 million.
It's a lot
So you did add a supervisor position.
Yeah.
as well, and
Yeah.
plus the assistant supervisor is also back.
Wow, that was it. I mean, I know all of them, the wages went up, but that one really,
I got you on the list, Bob.
really jumped up. You already
I
explained
wanted to
that.
question that one part there, Mr. Mayor, is that, okay, fine.
This one here caught our eyes big time. In the BMG Community Center 5-year budget. The category 3417 lessons. I'm assuming that's swimming lessons, I don't know.
Yeah.
So we budgeted $9,000 to bring in revenue, and we only took in 6,300. But we're forecasting $25,000 in revenue in 2024.
That's because we're hoping to have, the day camp as well. So this is, we're increasing our swimming lessons because we're hoping to have the swimming pool open more, the swimming pool was not open more. I don't know if they want to speak to this.
That's a huge forecast to bring in that much more revenue.
So again, it's like Stacy's saying, it's not just swimming lessons, it's also to implement the summer day camp program, so that's where the revenues are being accounted for, is in that line.
Okay.
So, yes, and we are hoping to be able to offer more swimming lessons.
No, that's good. It's that these are the, I like to go over line item by line item to see what stands out to me. Minor hockey in Brussels too, I mean, we forecasted 55, we came at 65, but now we're gonna lower it to 45 and 24. Is there a reduction in ice time gonna happen there?
That's because we do. The. No, I don't know. This year, yeah, this year's a 1 month less of ice time. Every other year at Brussels is 1 month less of ice time.
The other year?
Yeah, and Blythe is the other, so this year
That's what
Blythe,
it is, okay.
so Brussels is already, the ice is out, but Blythe is still operating.
So you can see the revenues oscillate back and forth over the years.
Yeah, okay. Salary and wages, we're forecasting 275 for Brussels. Now with Abby retired, and I thought we were gonna be hiring someone at a lot less pay than what we were paying Abby, but yet the wages really went up. So we only have what, 2 or 3 people that work there?
Yeah, you have 5 months of Abby still there.
Yeah, this includes 5 months of Abby still in 24,
In addition to summer day camp staff.
in addition to some days. So you see that it does go down in 25.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it, Councilor Sharp?
No, not yet. I said it's for.
Not a problem.
At the Seaforth Arena. For total revenues. So in 2023, we budgeted 495,000. And right now, the 2023 actual, I know it's still a moving target, you're at 550. But then in 2024, we're only budgeting to receive 317,000. It just seems odd that 2023, we're almost at 500,000, and now we're gonna reduce our potential revenue from the Seaforth Arena down to 317,000.
I can do that, so I would, don't look at the actual total revenue line, because that included our levy. In 2023, we put the levy at the bottom now. If you actually look at the user fee line, right, that shows you kind of what we're projecting, so we had 212 and 274. What's getting caught in that, at the top of the page, line 327. Was our levy going into the SDCC, we've stopped putting it in the actual top of the column and just showed it at the bottom.
It shows on a separate page, actually.
Yeah.
But you didn't do that for Brussels or Vanastra?
Yeah, we did. We stopped it for, well, it never was in Brussels, in Vanastra. But we have discontinued this practice.
Okay. Yes, it was very odd to see that.
Yeah, that's that difference between the levies. So if you took the 365.
365, 593.
And then you added the number at the bottom, like
Okay, thank you.
24.
At the Vanastra Rec Center, under 3505 donations, $27,000. Is that restricted to be used towards any specific item?
Is that the swim kids program?
You received $27,000 donations in 2023.
Yeah, you got different donations for different things.
Yeah, in 20, yeah.
So the 3,000 one is that swim program, you do it to raise money to offset the swim lesson fees, that's the typical
Yeah,
one.
but there's one here that we received. It says $27,369.
That's
And we were just wondering if it was restricted or pinned to a certain,
Yes.
a certain.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So,
Some is
in,
for-
yeah, and in 2023, we received, some substantial donations for different purposes. So there was one that was for, the swim for kids, there was one for, a capital project within the facility, and then there was also a donation for parks, improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
In administration. Explain to me what 3,500 rent is. we forecasted that we were gonna bring in 57,000 in rent, and we only brought in 39. What is that category?
That's a lot of internal rent. Again, that number is probably not up to date. The actual number is probably not up to date.
But what is it? What, under administration, that's at town hall, right?
I think it's a made up of several things.
I think probably it's part of our department. Yeah.
I don't know.
So a lot of the, I think what Stacy's suggesting is that it's a lot of those cost centers, so the building department, for example, we charge them rent, so it gets carried in a building fee allocation. Right, it's the proper way to do it because they're a self-controlled cost center, their fees are supposed to cover their costs. So the taxpayer shouldn't be paying for their buildings and furniture and things like that, so you charge them that, because of that cost center. Centralized.
And I think we only pointed that out within the last year or two. We made that change because the building department is supposed to be self-sufficient. We're not supposed to make any money off it, but we shouldn't have to charge the public for what we do. So at one time, we were not charging rent for the use of the office space, and it was being paid through the general levy. But now that we charge them, it reduces what the rest of the taxpayers have to pay.
No, it's for festival hydro.
So you're telling me that rent money,
Sorry,
it's
that
not
one,
really income?
it is, this one is, there's other ones in there that are offsetting in other departments, but this one is, I just called it up in the budget. We collect rent for festival hydro, the Cooper gravel pit, for the farmland rental, this is where our farmland rental
Okay,
goes, but
that-
the curling club is in
That
there.
makes sense. The other one didn't make sense to me.
Trailer park rentals and Peaceful Heart Ministries.
Okay, on the same page, administration, this one had a curiosity, yeah, 3601. Investment interest. I'm assuming that means interest we made on our investments? Is that what that means?
Yes,
Because we forecasted to make $267,000 in interest in 2023. And to date, we've only made 10,000.
yeah, again, those actual numbers are not up to date. They're just not up to date.
Typically, those,
So when will they, when will we know how well we did on interest?
As soon as I have a list, as soon as I can get the manpower to help do this.
Because we're depending on making a lot of money there in interest, almost $300,000, right?
Yeah.
those will be like part of those year-end adjustments that we're processing.
Okay. Still in administration, 5,300. Consultant and professional services. We had planned on spending 305,000. We only spent 97,000. Is that when we hire consultants for all these fire review boards and that type of stuff? or-
Yeah, and then the pay equities in there, asset retirement obligation was in there. That's a big difference. We, that asset retirement obligation, that was done in 2024.
Okay.
And we didn't need as much as we thought anyway.
Still in administration, 8025. Building renovations. So right now you budgeted 123,000.
That would be that list that was on the sheet.
That covers that?
So that'll be the roof replacement, HVAC will be under equipment, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's for the town hall.
Okay, now we're moving to fire chief, transfer to reserves. But we didn't do anything in 2023, but I see in 2024 and beyond, we're planning on putting $300,000 into reserves in the fire department.
Yeah, last year we budgeted in each fire station to transfer to the reserves, but this year we've decided that we're just gonna keep all the fire reserves together in one transfer account to one fire department reserve. So it's just been moved to the under fire chief instead of being distributed across all the different
So
stations.
this 300,000 that we're putting into reserves is gonna be used for future equipment or?
Yep, anything, future capital for fire,
Yeah, capital for that year or capital for future years.
yes. You'll
So
see the
this-
same thing in community services, there's a big.
Yeah, I saw, that's one of the
The
ones.
same question, that's all the recreation reserve. All in one place now, so you can see what we're putting away for community services and recreation in one place, and then there's one reserve. So,
And then each of the other cost centers then draw out of that reserve.
There was an interesting one here in, still in fire between the three stations. So like at Seaport Station. In 2023, they budgeted 15,000 for training. And they only spent $75. And I didn't see the same kind of training numbers in the other fire stations. But from here on in, from 2024 on, now we're budgeting 30,000 every year for training. Is that for this new standard? Still in fire stations, but we're in Seaforth here now. Transfer from reserves. We're planning on transferring from reserves 125,000.
You have to cover capital, shouldn't have to capital.
125.
We're not spending that much at Seaforth,
The portion of it, this is accounting thing, so we have an amortization going on at the C4 station, it's an in and out. So if you actually look up in the revenues, you'll see the transfer coming in. And then transfer, I think it's what, 76,000, 67,000?
okay, I'm in the chief building official, you explained all the minor hockey and the other stuff. Oh, old timer hockey for the inspector.
That's my category.
That's your category, Barry. Okay.
Counselor Fisher, did you have some follow-up?
Yeah, back to the daycare, please, if you could, Counselor Charton, please. The differences there, I remember the discussion about the supervisor, that there was a person coming off of, I think this was in camera though, Mr. Mayor, maybe I shouldn't be talking about it.
She's back to work.
You can talk about the fact that we've added a new supervisor, that's all public, not information. You can certainly talk about the increases we've done in wages, that's all public information.
But there was a person who came back to work and we thought that was only going to be for a year or two and then that would be over and done and our wages would be back to, previous level.
So that person's only just come back. So keep to your theory, year or two, then we gotta carry that for a couple of years.
But that doesn't, and then let me do some math here. So 15% on 650 would be 90 and another, what's a supervisor, another 90-ish? So we're up to 180 on to 650 is 830. How do you get to $1 million from, I only get 830,000, but these wages are,
Plus benefits. The million includes benefits
yeah,
Plus your compensation review.
I just did that.
and the 40-hour week. The part-time employee is now full-time.
We were told before that they were working full-time. That's why you changed the designation.
For the most part, they were, but you'll have some benefit cost increases to that.
We now pay owners and everything else.
Okay.
And overs.
Omers is there anyway, because it doesn't matter whether you're part-time or full-time anymore, Omers changed as of last year. So those costs were carried, so yeah, you certainly have your benefit costs when you're gonna apply.
Daycare fees. I don't understand. I realize that which government, federal government is paying us to charge $10, right?
Correct.
So if we need to raise our rates to whatever to cover expenses, can we not do that?
For school age children, you can.
No, for,
Just for school age children, you can, because they're not part of that Canada-wide
yeah, okay,
daycare program. But when they're non-school age children, part of that Canada-wide program, the federal government restricts, well, through the province, restricts your rate increase. So they stipulate what your increase per year can be at 3 or 4% regardless, or 2%, whatever, regardless of what your cost increases are.
So, and when do you know what you're gonna get?
Yeah, we know what we're getting from the county. The county tells us what they subsidize.
The county handles the contract, we don't see it.
That's right.
We submitted an application to the county, it was called emergent funding, to indicate that what we needed to be offset because of the rates were frozen. And then the county offset that with a grant, I guess you would want, it's not really a grant, it's more.
It's a one-time payment, which is included in the budget.
Yeah, to help offset the operating costs due to raised wages, et cetera, that were restricted to raise the childcare rates. So they provided us funding for that. And the childcare rates are frozen until September, and then possibly in September, the government will come up with a different solution. Plan, yeah.
But this funding you just referred to from the county, you said that was one time only?
For 2024.
Each year one.
Every year they give us,
Yeah,
they give
Well,
us
they
a
give
chunk
us
of money.
more,
I
but
know, I
this-
realize that, Mr. Mayor, but
But this specific one, she's trying for, this is the first year that we received it. And,
the top up, so to
Lisa,
speak.
yeah,
Kind of,
Lisa paid for it. We did not budget this forward, as I don't know for sure if this is something going forward.
For what,
Lisa said there's gonna be a reevaluation in September, so this might just be to get us through till September.
I mean, there's no guarantee that that funding that we, sort of a one-time each year funding. It is a little difficult sometimes trying to project forward because the county allocates the money as they sort of get it in, and it's the same thing from the province, so they don't know what next year brings. So there's no stability to it. It's probably something maybe from a collective, municipalities might want to start advocating, having some stability to the funding coming through that program. I don't think it's the county's fault. I think they get money in and then they try to distribute it out based upon what comes in. But it seems it comes in sort of these lumps of money that's not guaranteed for the following year. So once we've got it, we budget it. Sometimes after we've set the budget, we'll get some additional money that we didn't plan in the budget, but we can't budget for it unless we know for sure it's coming.
so this is another federal poorly thought out, poorly planned job.
Part of the issue that we run into, Bob, is that, we staff our daycare service with municipal employees. There's a lot of municipalities that do supply the building, but do not staff the facility. And so it's a different wage rate, and I cannot tell you where the federal government got their figures from when they were gonna do their calculations. But, based on what we're receiving, I suspect they did not do it based on municipal, employment rates.
I think Councilor Chartrand told me we lost, or it cost us to operate $160,000 in 23.
155.
Okay,
Right now.
155,000. Is that accurate, or you're still waiting for year-end figures?
I can't say anything's accurate at this point because the year-end final closings and adjustments are not done.
How can we do a budget when we don't know?
But then refer to the prior year budget as a benchmark. It's coming in, it looks like better.
Yeah.
Than last year, but again, there's probably some year adjustments that will make that number different.
Then with our extra wages, what is our guesstimate law cost in 24 for the daycare, please?
So the net impact to the taxpayers,
Yes, over and above revenues.
377,318.
More than double.
Not more than double them,
We
but
budgeted 230 in 2023 as a levy requirement to fund daycare. And we're projecting 377 in 2024, so roughly on 100.
But the actual is around 160, you just said.
That's the actual. But some of that funding is coming through again, as that lump sum funding we're getting from the county that's not projected. Right, so if you go back up and look at the revenues, even though we don't have final numbers in our actual, but still, if you look at our revenues were also up by 150,000, roughly, right? 140,000
Over 22?
for 23, so 23, we budgeted 303,000, say $304,000 worth of revenue from the funding coming through the county. Well, we ended up with 445 coming through the county. And the biggest difference probably there was, I can't tell where it was
Yeah,
from,
it's
but
different
it's
things.
just additional funding that came through the county that came in partway through the year or whatever, so it's that sort of lump sum, one chunk of money that they throw at us to help offset our cost, and we'll continue to probably get those, but we can't budget those. Does that make sense?
Yeah, does, but then should we be discussing getting out of the daycare business? Or am I allowed to say that without daggers and knives?
I was Councilor Fisher, he's coming anyway.
I know, that scares me, Councilor McGrath. Okay, thank you.
I'll give you a heads up at this point here.
Water bottle.
You'll be behind me, I know.
That's slow.
Oh, Deputy Mayor was next, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brad. Just a couple questions on the council page there to start with. It's around the integrity officer. See, last year we budgeted 15 and our actual was 37. Just wanted to know, how does that work? I know we've had a couple investigations triggered by other people. Is that just by case basis then? Is that it? For instance, when I called, then we would get charged for
That's correct.
the information that I received.
Anybody who contacts the commissioner or anybody who makes a complaint to the commissioner, council, public, we have to pay for that. So it's very hard to predict
Yes.
how much we're gonna spend on a commissioner.
Yeah, that's understandable, but I'd like to hear that. Second question.
I just want to follow up on that. One of the things we've done is start to put, you'll see in the reserves under council, we're putting a little bit of money each year into what we'll call a reserve fund that will help offset if we do have some random investigation come in, so it doesn't throw you guys out of budget all the time. You know?
Just another question then to follow up. Then at one time you mentioned about the cost of an election every 4 years, and you talked about maybe putting a little bit away every year.
Yeah, and that's part of that reserve too, I think.
Okay.
We not do that. this
No,
year.
it's all part of that. So that reserve for council is to cover the cost of the iPads. And to help even out the integrity officer expenses and to even out the election expenses. So if you see in 26, you see the election expenses in, and then you'll see a transfer from reserves to offset that, and it kind of keeps that pretty close.
Perfect. No, that's good that that's been done. If I can follow up then with another question, just on Carolyn's and economic development down at the bottom, that number 6,001 grants. That's money that she's requesting that she's going to be giving out to different programs.
That's.
Sorry, go ahead.
CCIP.
Yeah, well, it's just the 20,000, right? It's for the community improvement plan, so. Yeah.
That's what that is. If I could, then flip over to Brussels Water System number 8055, capital infrastructure. It's got $411,000 in that. What was, I looked through that, I couldn't find anything like that.
That has to do with road reconstruction.
For Jamboree, or for sports?
Sports,
Gotcha, okay. Perfect. If I could switch over to, I think this right, I'll just let it go from back. In the Brussels Medical Dental Center, capital building renovations, I know it's not till 2025, you have 30,000. Is that for a new roof that we talked about, or was that something? That you have?
I believe it's just for, isn't it just for, the hospital?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a roof. I can check that quickly.
Okay.
I
I thought that, I was wondering what it was for 30,000, and for some reason I thought we did two, Diane.
Is that the 55?
I'm positive we just did the new roof.
I know it's not until 2025,
Yeah.
but it just popped up.
We'll get you the answer.
Perfect. Back to the Huron East Health Center.
Yeah.
See the rents, you're proposing to put the rent up, is it? What percentage does that rent go up every year? Does it go up every year or was?
Well, it's indexed, but at this point, actually, the family health team side of it's likely gonna be coming to you guys to ask for a reduction in the rent because they don't get, their funding comes through the province and the province only increases it. I don't know what it is, let's just say they do 2%, but we're increasing the rent to 3.8%. Then they're saying, well, we don't get extra funding, our funding is based on 2%, but you're charging us more. So we do try to index it based upon all the agreements as they're established.
So,
CPI, for cost of living increase.
so where does that extra money would have to come from then? If they only have X amount of dollars and we're asking for Y, where does that come from then?
So they're gonna come to you, potentially come to you to ask for a reduction. We would probably just show our transfer to reserve being reduced,
Oh,
right? That's how we would handle it,
right.
but if we don't reduce it, I'm not sure how they handle it.
I just wondered if that cuts back on the number of doctors we have there, then, you know,
The
that,
doctors is different, so the doctors pay their own rent for their offices.
Okay.
And they're billed individually as for rent, so it's a little bit different, it's just the family health.
and then also on the Huron East Health Center as well, down into the operating, like utilities, for instance, it jumped from the actual 20,000 this year, last year, I should say, to 28,000. Just wondering, are you seeing something there that it seemed like quite a jump, that's all. I know your budget at 24 the year previous, it came in at 20.
So I think at all the utilities, we're probably missing a month to be entered, so we're just processing that last bill.
Okay,
So that won't be in there, and so, and plus I think the utilities are coming around 3.8% cost of living. I think they were sort of stabilized a little bit, so. Yeah, kind of look at what the year previous was, it's probably pretty close,
okay,
once we actually get all the actions, and that's it.
let's compare it. And so obviously that's probably the same then as property taxes and contracted services. It's probably still a month worth of bill, you have to go in that in for the action, okay?
Counselor Newell, and then.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to BMG Community Center. There's a number of different rents that are in there. So I'm thinking of the rent that is 3515 Auditorium Hall. It was budgeted for $8,000 last year, and then this year we budgeted $14,000. And then next year's budget is dropping down to $9,000. So I'm just wondering with some of the changes with the standardization of fees and the expectation that there'll be higher revenue generated from Brussels, that number maybe shouldn't be higher, knowing that some of the events that are run there are in the $1,000 range anyhow, right? So I just wondered if that should maybe be higher.
Which account was it? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The rental fee, auditorium.
Yeah, give me the last four digits.
3515.
Yeah,
So I think what he's getting at is we budgeted 8,000, we brought in 14 based upon the actuals to date. And we're still going back and even though we adjusted the higher rate, we're still on projecting.
I know there was a reason for that.
I think so,
There,
too.
there's something in there specific that was. Just can't.
There's something in the 14 that we think that's.
Yeah, why it is at 14.
even if we were to look at the 2023 budget compared to the 2024 budget and take the actuals out, it's only going up
$800.
$800,
Yeah.
but we know that there's events that are coming that are $2,000 and $3,000 a piece, whether it be fair board, things like that. So I'm just wondering if that number shouldn't be in there.
It's not necessarily that those rates, I think the organizations were miscalculating what they think their rates are actually going to be. We're ranging about anywhere to be about $700 to $1,000 in their rates. So, yes. There's room that we could probably increase those, make some adjustments.
Yeah, if they're coming in at 700 or 1,000, I know we can have more than 8 rentals there, so it should be higher.
But I believe that there's something in that 14 that was like a one-time, like for the 2023. I think it was like a one-time event or one-time thing. And, I can't remember what it is. off the top of my head.
Was there an election in there?
No,
That was, anyway, we'll look at that. Yep.
In
Mhm.
terms of the final, you can have it.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It was the special events. Like this auditorium. Is that pickleball and stuff like? But is it homecoming? Is there something from revenue from homecoming? That was the year before. Is that 2022?
Okay.
I will look at that, yeah.
Counselor Sharger.
Yeah, two questions and direct this to Lisa. So where in the Seaforth community would the pickleball show up? Because we generate anywhere from $800 to $1,000 a month. And I know you got room ball, you got floor tables, you got auditorium.
I believe that it was either, I think it's in the rental equipment, the 3507, because the SDCC does not really rent anything. I believe that's for pickleball admissions.
Okay, well, next year, based on what I've seen in the last 5 or 6 months, it's gonna be around $10,000 to $12,000 a year. I think.
Shuffleboard.
Yeah, okay, and my last question is to Brad. I know going through this package here, you can see where different things go in reserves. Is it possible to get a one-pager as to all the different reserves that we're gonna be putting into for 2024? Excluding, don't need to know sewer and water, because that's user paid, right? Don't need to know gas tax, but all the other things that we're putting money into reserves into, fire, into recreation, into whatever, just to get a handle as to how much total are we putting into reserves this year, and what are those categories?
It'd be we can do that. It'd be a combination of what's going into reserves and what's coming out.
Yeah, is it, try to figure it out for each one of these pages, a nice summary page of all of that would be helpful. When we talk about a potential of reducing something, if you had that chart, like there was one year, I forget which one it was, Bob, there was one year where you were putting in X amount of dollars, I think it was in fire, you're putting in X amount of dollars for 1 year, but then 0 in 2025. And the question came up, could you move that into that year? Depending on what it's gonna be spent on, but I think a summary for all of us of all the revenues would be handy to have. Or reserves, I mean.
Okay, so I'm taking that as a motion from Counselor Chartrand to produce a report that shows all the ins and outs of the various reserves that are being generated through Huron East. Do I have a seconder for that? So by Counselor Dalton. Any final questions on that? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you have any follow-up?
Yes, I do. For you to Brad, or whoever, about the Brussels Cemetery, the plot sales, I see in 2023, you had $2,700, but from then on, it goes to 0. It does. I think it's still mentioned it on Mount Pleasant one as well for sales. It's been done away with Cranbrook, which is probably, they don't probably sell many plots in Cranbrook, but just wondering, was that done away with on purpose, or did you plan to holding it
I
in.
just looked back and we rarely have spot sales. It was just unusual to have spot sales, it seemed, just looking historically.
With the Brussels one,
Yeah.
Stacy? Because I
Yeah.
thought he would be more busy selling more plots there.
For my time here, that's what I looked at and I noticed.
Okay, no, it was just odd how it was zeroed out, but, because I think in Mount Pleasant there, if I look right, you have $1,400 in there, but I guess what's a plot now, $600 or? close-
800 and something like
That's
that,
it?
if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I think the main thing we're doing is we're not budgeting for it. Because we don't necessarily know that we're gonna get it. Right. That would,
Yes, that's, yeah, it's found money if we find it.
And I would just head with the deficit carry forward anyways.
Perfect. We can follow up then under administration, number 3423, it just says, sale of equipment, $600,000 in there. Is that something big that we sold?
It's not equipment, that's your land sales.
Oh, okay, all right, well, that was,
That was in the word. Since
and under the fire chief there, when you talk about insurance, and I see insurance under, the fire chief's section, but also insurance is listed under each one of the other fire stations. Will that by chance pay for the fireman's breakfast this year? Without them having to go out and get extra insurance?
That's just the municipal insurance, and I believe it's also their health insurance.
Okay.
That through the program,
that's your firefighter, VF, volunteer
the
firefighter.
firefighters insurance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. It's just last year, I think they had to go and obtain insurance on their own to help with fireman's breakfast. I'm not sure who paid for that in the end. I just wondered if that was going to be looked after again this year. That's all.
Yeah, I think I think we probably should look at how we're gonna make sure they're covered in the insurance. And how that gets, I think some of the ways we've got around it in the past, by calling it a municipal sanctioned event.
Yeah.
And so therefore, as long as it's being posted on our property as a municipal sanctioned event, and help for your liability.
Yeah, I don't like the word of getting around stuff. It's just if, if we come up with a good plan, but maybe we could just make it a plan for all three stations rather than them having to go individually and sort of find stuff that way.
Yeah.
Everybody's the same, so. Well, I think we can.
Now that we've got a new insurance agent, we could probably get an answer. I think Councillor Fisher was next.
No, I think I'm done, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sharkey.
Yeah, a couple more questions. There's a couple new, I guess, new terms. So the one that's called storm sewer services. Is that paid through the reserves of sewer and water, or
No, those are your,
that's a brand new category? I don't recall that.
no,
It's an old category.
that's one category.
It's always been talked, the very end of transportation. and
Okay,
it's-
a separate sheet now that kind of throws, what is that?
It's always been a separate cost center. We'd like to get rid of it at some point in time and kind of just roll it into Terry's.
Transportation, yeah.
Well, what is it? It's like,
Storm drains.
Storm drains doing the work, so sometimes periodically varies, I don't use it very good.
We clean catch basins out every year, and that's part of that cost for the contracted services we share with the county.
and this one must have been baked in somewhere too, because I don't ever recall a title of agriculture and reforestation.
That's been that way.
Yeah, I guess,
That's your municipal drains.
this is all your drains?
Municipal drains, yeah.
Maybe we should call them municipal drains.
Street planting.
And then community services, parks and halls.
That is a good one.
That's a brand new one, right? And we have budgeted. There was something on here. So in 2024, we budgeted $656,000.
Or,
Yes,
let me get it all up.
transfer to reserve, 650,000. Transfer out of reserves, 177,000. But according to your revenues and expenditures, when it's all said and done, total community services, you're budgeting $656,000 dollars.
So again, this one is where we're putting the reserve transfer to for all of community services and recreation. So if you look at the Brussels Arena, the Seaforth Arena, there are no transfers to reserves in any of those cost centers anymore. The transfer to reserves for recreation is in this one spot. So that's your recreation reserve.
So where, we were gonna take money out of recreation reserve to help pay for the Seaforth Arena.
That's correct. That transfer out would be in Seaforth Arena to offset the roof expenditure.
But not out of this.
It's coming out of that reserve, but it's not coming out of that report.
So we're putting money
You're
into.
saying you're putting all the reserves into one report, but then you're taking it out of,
Well, I'm
Reserves
putting it
exist.
into a reserve and then I'm taking it out in another place.
okay. So what are we budgeting $656,000 for in community services, parks and all?
The largest component of that is your transfer to reserves.
Which is 650,000.
That's the big part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that was,
That goes into what we're calling the community service reserve, and then each of the cost centers draw out of that for the capital projects.
so this was a brand new document. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from council this time? Councilor Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That 650,000 that you are moving, is any of it designated for this year?
Yes.
It's all being used this year. We're using it all,
For which, please?
all those recreation capital projects. So the roof, the brine pumps, the parks truck, can't go, this thing on,
Yeah.
there's a whole lot of recreational projects.
The
Dollar for 25.
electrical
Like
panel.
electrical panel.
So that,
Holy cow.
okay, fine, thank you.
There's a whole list there.
I'll go to Councilor Deal. She hasn't talked so
That
long.
makes no sense to me to do it that way.
Going forward, is this gonna be consolidated so that we're not flipping back like the community service parks and halls? Will like the rec centers be listed underneath this so that we kind of,
Yeah.
everything's together instead of,
I would
20
love to
pages back.
reorganize it. Again, I'm, working with what I started with, and so we're slowly reorganizing. So I would guess
Is it-
to reorganize.
you'd
It's
probably
not-
have less questions is what I'm getting at.
I think it's a challenge in how,
I have to do a lot, like I have to refurbish the whole setup of each report, right, yeah.
all the GL accounts would have. to be reinstated. That's-
Yeah.
I have one other question, Councilor Hay.
And I'm trying to eliminate a lot of expenses, and I think we already started with that, like, I don't know if the waste management is down to a lot of, it's a lot more condensed.
Right. I just have one question about the Seaforth BIA. R&M building, what is that for?
It's for their little building up the street.
Okay, okay. I didn't realize they had a separate building. Thank you very much.
Councilor Morris.
Through you to staff, for the Brussels pool, the capital, is that going to be an out of season project, or will that impact operational revenue for lessons or for the pool rental public swimming?
We would try to schedule that when the food is not in operation. Makes no sense if you're right in the middle of its operating. You want to be most likely, I guess, the system's gonna have to be drained, you're gonna have to pour the water in. Pull the deck out.
Deputy Mayor was next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brad. Brad, again, under administration, under 8025 capital building renovations, is that just for work here? It's 123,000,
It's all of the work here, so it's the roof, it's the HVAC, it's the
all tied in.
renovations downstairs, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, and then another follow-up under fire chief, and I know we've talked about replacing the fire chief's vehicle. My accountant always says to me, if you don't spend anything on your vehicle, why are you replacing it? In the budget, we didn't spend anything last year, repairs and maintenance on the vehicle. Okay. So, I mean, it's just a comment, that's all.
Yeah.
Under the fire station for Seaforth, under service recovery fee, I may have missed that if it was touched on already. What is that? It's 55,000.
Cost or is that revenues or costs?
It's under donations, actually, your service user fees is where it's under, sorry. The number was 3400.
Gross.
Is that a revenue?
Right?
Under fire, Seaport Fire.
So I think that's where we go back out and get dollars from, through the insurance companies.
Oh. We do that? We try to get intent to do,
For, I think your rule is for anybody out of town, like if there's a
Oh.
vehicle accident, there's damages and like.
Oh, okay, not that fire marquee.
No, it's not the fire marquee, but I think we still try to do some recovery on that.
Oh, okay,
Used to anyway.
okay, that makes sense.
I think it's.
And just to comment under, under animal control there, nothing wrong with the budget itself. But can we put something on the website or in the next council newsletter or tax newsletter? Because I get people call me all the time, what do I do? And I know we're still trying to get past the old into the new system. But people call all the time, what do I do? You know, I want this wild dog here. Be nice if that was either in a newsletter or on the website, so they could follow up and,
In terms of what to do with an animal?
yes, procedure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Counselor Chartrand.
In transportation, 511, under bridge and culvert. We've budgeted $60,000. Is that for that one bridge you're talking about, or no?
That would be for, I believe, T1 guardrail. Usually your small culvert. It's like-
Is that's not covered under gas tax?
No, it's a zero line.
Reason why I ask is that in 2025, we have forecasted zero budget.
Oh,
That's your bridge.
that's for the inspection of the bridges.
All that's for inspection?
Yeah, so every other year. we have to have a consultant go
Now,
over.
what do we use the gas tax for exactly?
It's not called gas tax anymore, it's called,
Canadian Community Building Fund.
we're typically using it for roads and bridges and pensions. That's kind of what we kept it to. We take the money from.
So inspection of those bridges could fall in that category.
I think it has to go to capital still. An inspection is operating inspection, but the building fund has to go to capital. All of those have to go to capital, OSIP, building fund, and when we do aggregate capital.
Thank you. Just last time to read.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under chief building official, down at number 5300, consultant and professional service. You budgeted for $10,000 in previous years. It looked like we didn't even budget anything. And last year we spent $50. Are you anticipating something or?
And Brad.
So we had anticipated doing a rate study for the building department to set their rates. But we wanted to get through our succession plan, and we just never got to it in 2023. So our goal is to still bring that rate study forward. But it's still, it's just being drawn from us to do that.
Any other questions? I just want to respond to Counselor Fisher, and yeah, Bob, I can understand, the whole in and out. It seems confusing at times, but it is exactly how the accounting system is supposed to work. And hopefully the report that, Counselor Chartrand, requested, when that comes through, if there's concerns about, how easy it is to digest, if there's a need to break it up more, we can, but sometimes you might find it easier when all your reserves for recreation are in one spot and just showing other locations where they go out. But once we get that report, if there's any concerns, council can certainly ask questions at that time. Very good questions by council. Thank you very much to the staff for having the answers on hand for almost everything that was brought up. Really do appreciate that. Is there any final questions that anybody has for this presentation at this time? Councilor Fisher.
Thank you, Commissioner. What's next, please? Where do we go after this?
So I think there's maybe a few questions. Well, I think there, in terms of the budget itself, maybe a few adjustments we'll look at. What we'll do is we'll make those, yeah, then we'll make those adjustments, and then we'll bring back sort of a final draft, with a bylaw, basically, to approve the budget.
And the tax rate calculation.
Go ahead, Bob. I didn't hear that, please, Ms. Grenier.
Well, and the tax rate calculation will bring back with the bylaw.
So we'll set the tax rates for the bylaw.
So unless we do something right now, we're looking at 11.8.
That's correct.
I don't like 11.8. I don't, do my fellow councilors like 11.8? So it's time, obviously. Where could we find? It's $85,000 a point, so 3 points. Where can we find $250,000 to come down 3 points?
About 300,000 becomes 3 points.
I thought a point was $85,000.
That was last year, this year it's about.
Oh, I thought that you told me that this year.
No,
It's 100,000 a point.
300,000 gotta come up with.
Okay. It's
So it's a very fair question to ask Councillor Fisher, but as the CEO pointed out on one of the pages of the presentation, is that if you cut 1% out this year, then you've got to bring it up. Instead of a 1% increase next year, it's a 2% increase.
maybe.
How far do we kick it down the road, and do we end up with the same problem that we had with pay equity, where it's a bigger number? Go ahead, Councilor
I
Sharp.
think it comes back into that reserve package that I asked for too, you know, is there something in that reserve package that we put out, we still put it in, but maybe we put it in 2026 or 2027,
Or not as much.
or not as much, instead of putting 300,000 in reserves in this one account,
Fire,
put
put
150,000,
150 in.
you know what I'm saying, like, maybe that's an avenue.
and we've taken that all into consideration in the presentation of this budget, like. That was all considered, and any reallocations were already made that we thought we could do, and we did make some.
At the end of the day, even though we're putting money into reserves based upon this 2024 budget, we're pretty much consuming it all.
We're not gonna really start banking reserves until 3 years down the road.
So the end of the day, if we defer some capital items, like I spoke to, and say you reduce your reserve contribution by 100,000, because that's essentially what you're doing. Right? Then next year to get caught back up, you gotta double it up to cover your 2025 expenses. Right? Because you gotta pay for what you're deferring to 25, and then you gotta also, right, so that 100,000 you're deferring this year is gonna be added to the capital in 2025. You've only added 100,000, you've reduced your reserve contribution by 100,000. To catch back up, you gotta double it back up again, right? So that's why 1% becomes 2% next year.
I think a fair question or comparison is, where will we be in, property tax costs compared to the rest of the county? Because if we were at $1 and everybody else was at 10, and you said, hey, we're going up 100%, which takes us to $2, but everybody else is still at 10, then you know what? You got a hard time complaining about the 100% increase because we hadn't been keeping up. If you find out that going up the 11% is putting us way out of whack compared to where we were with everybody else in the county, then I'd say, is there something we need to be doing harder? Or are we keeping in trend with everybody else? And do we have any of those numbers at this point, how our comparisons are to the rest of the county?
We certainly at our December 20th meeting, I did give you kind of a tax rate comparison based upon 2023. Everybody's still going through their budget process. We don't know what 24 is gonna look like collectively.
Right.
Right, but if you keep using that, we could use that and say, you know, assume theirs don't change, where do we move up in that spectrum? We could do something like that, to kind of update that table that we gave you back in the December 20th. To show you where you land.
Councilor Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what bothers me when we talk about these reserves. You say you're gonna put $650,000 into that community, whatever reserve, and then you're gonna take it right out.
Yeah.
Well, then just budget it, don't put it in, don't
Well,
confuse us with reserves.
we're getting you in the habit of putting a certain dollar amount each year into a reserve, so next year you put in, you're gonna increase that from 650 to say, let's say 750. Because
But you're gonna turn around and spend it right away, so it's not a reserve.
not potentially, we'll be putting some money away because the 2 years down the road, we got a big hit coming again.
So
Right?
then call it a restricted reserve then.
It's not restricted, it's being used for that purpose.
It's being used
You can move it-
immediately.
You can move it around, so if we end up with a whole pile of money in recreation, let's say for some reason one of Barry's trucks breaks down and we gotta find some money and there's 200,000 sitting in the recreation reserve. You guys have the ability to draw from it, right? Because it's not restricted to a specific activity, we're just trying to get you guys in the habit, you never used to put your money into reserves, you don't have any reserves, right? So we're trying to get you in this trend of putting money, that's the financial strategy. Yes, for the first 2 or 3 years, you're gonna spend it as fast as you're putting it in, but by year 4, you start slowing down. As you keep increasing, there'll be a balance in there, and what I can do is, council, we go back to those big cost sheets I had and look at the reserve balances at the bottom line. Of that sheet, that gives you an indication of how your reserves are going to work.
So I understand your comment, Bob, but you gotta kind of take your question along with Brad's answer and the fact that we had talked about in the past, of setting these reserves up, so we put the money in, the money was going to be there for when we need it, but we never did it, and then we'd always have a year where we get into our budget and go, well, we've got to just raise the levy now. So the whole intent is, yes, over the course of the next 3 years, it's going to be some major crunch time, but even if you look at the operational budget that was presented today, once we get past the 3rd year, our increase for those operational budgets are less than half of what the increase is this year. So the system will start to have basically equalized from a year-to-year perspective, so the public are not seeing the big increases in their tax rate. That is the goal behind what we're trying to accomplish.
I'm a firm believer in KISS, and I'm not seeing KISS in this. Keep it simple, stupid. As to other communities, of the 6 other communities that I have heard of in Huron County that have set their tax rates, are all below 8. Including Huron County itself. And we're at 11.8. What does that say? I don't know. Anyway, okay.
Councilor McGrath?
I don't like being compared to other municipalities and not playing race. Somebody wants to step out in front of the truck, let them go ahead. I'm not gonna follow them. At the end of the day, let's not forget, no knock against Brussels, sorry. But we took $2 million of our cash and put it into a subdivision. That's money we did have on hand. That's right. So now we're sitting here fighting over reserve money and money that we don't have on hand. Yes, the lots are selling. But I'll just reiterate my disappointment at the time, we're not developers. So you got $2 million sitting up there in Brussels. And I hope it sells quick, and I hope you get your money back, but that money could have been used here today to offset some of this stuff that has to be done or wants to be done. That's the only comment I make there, but don't compare me to anybody else. I think we're here as a community group, community, I'm talking like Trump again. As a group of people, we should be here thinking of Huron East tax rate, not what Clinton or Central Huron or anybody else is. So I think Bob brings up a very good point. You can say what the rates are, but we don't have to follow them just because they're there. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I can appreciate that aspect of it. My concern though, with the talk about the money that we put into the lots in Brussels, is that if we had had the cash on hand, yes, we could have made this year a little bit less, but when you look at the going forward, we'd have had a bigger jump next year if we were using that cash to offset this year, because this year's increase is being built on with that year's increase. And it would have been a lot bigger crunch next year to get back to where we needed to end up stabilizing this 3 or 4 years down the road.
Maybe, but maybe not. You're spending,
Yeah.
you're looking at $300,000 to drop it. So you take 300,000 of that, we've got quite a wish list going on here with the with the trucks and roofs and everything else. Those are things you don't have to do every year. We're a big enough area, you're gonna be doing something every year, don't get me wrong. But this might be an exceptional year with, well, 1.3 million for the arena roof.
I'll let staff.
I just, I don't want the conversation to keep going on about, we had this money in a reserve. It was our working capital. That's basically your cash flow dollars. That's to fund your, it's not a reserve that you allocate to projects. It's your working capital. Use that working capital to fund that Brussels subdivision.
That's right.
Okay? It was always, the reason why we justified working the capital is we thought they would all sell really quick and we would throw the money back in as fast as we put it out. Fortunately, that didn't work out that way. So whatever we put into that Brussels subdivision came out of your working capital. As you sell the lot, the money's going back in to replenish your working capital. So essentially you borrowed it for your working capital. It's not money that all of a sudden you can go reallocate to other projects. Right? So I just want to take that out of the equation, right? So I mean, the reason why we're comparing the municipalities is because we've got to look at your service level. Right, so you gotta be realistic about what your service levels are as a municipality. So if Councillor Fisher says he wants to see us somehow shave $300,000 out of the operating budget, then my question would be to you, is what service are you going to eliminate? I don't mean to be that blunt, but that's the reality of it.
Councillor Stepler?
Yeah, couple things here at the end. How much was the self-contained breathing approval from last year?
800,000.
Close to $1 million.
675 is what the was Brussels, sorry, Morris has their share, West Perth has a share, so I think we ended up with 570 as our share.
Ballpark. So if we revisited that and did that in a staged approach, or listen to our fire review, that could save us some money.
That's being borrowed though, so it's not,
Sorry?
that's just being borrowed, you're financing that.
That's short term. Okay, find other money. Capital, I think excellent work on the staff for going through many years, so not just 24, 25. I think as council, we have to look at capital budget going through for different years. Do we truly need whatever that number is over the next bit? Because there's something in there that we can pull out. It's not a dollar for dollar. It is if we have to replace it to keep our standards. And I definitely love the approach of getting the ins and outs, because yes, you're right, accounting is ins and outs, that's what has to be done. But if we're not putting something in for next year or purchasing for 2 years, I think we can bring that down a bit and then reevaluate it at different times to hitting at 11.8 and, paying for our kids' future. So.
Any final comments from council before we go on? We are getting close to 5 o'clock.
Get an unlisted number, I already had 2 complaints.
Pardon me?
Get an unlisted number, I already had 2 complaints about taxes going up. And that's what they're just going.
Yeah, we're hearing it live, right? We're hearing it live right now.
That's good.
At the end of the day, I think Councillor Fisher said he's heard from other municipalities that they were at 8. I know everybody's already got the county, so I don't know, because here's always the problem. Have you already combined them, or are they just what the municipality was raising? Because ours, at the end of the day, is probably going to be down to that 8 point something or 9, by the time we combine it with the county.
Probably right,
Yeah.
the tax rate increase itself, right, this is just your levy, right, so this is how much you have to levy additional, right? But then you gotta account for all of your assessment will be and what the assessment value will be, you have to factor in what the county will be, so you're not looking at 11.8% tax increase to everybody's tax bill.
Right.
It'll be some blended rate.
Right, which probably gets us down into that 8% figure by the time you put your education, you put your county and everything else together. It used to be, if the county had a big year, we used to penalize ourselves and try and offset it, which we were only literally hurting ourselves when we should have been telling the public it wasn't us that screwed up. The county was the one taking your money this year. Can I get a mover and a seconder to accept this report for information? Moved by Councilor Stepler, second by Councilor Chartrand. All those in favor? Huge. Is there any other business anybody needs to raise at this point? Okay, and then can I get a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Moved by Councilor Deal, second by Councilor Wilby. That be it hereby resolved that bylaw 23 of 2024, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council begin the first, second, third, and final readings, signed by the mayor and the clerk, and the seal of the corporation be affixed thereto. All those in favor? Great. And actually, just before I adjourn, and I should have mentioned this earlier, there's also another delegation coming tonight. And based on the information that is in our package, I don't remember the people, I apologize, but they apparently have been waiting quite a while to have something done. In fairness, to let them know that we're not just stumps sitting here, that after they give their presentation, it might be very appropriate if someone was to make a motion not only to accept their delegation for information, but to also ask the Public Works Manager to bring back a report with information about that roadway, because I can't even answer the questions right now. I did not take the time to phone Barry. I don't know if it will be dug up to be reconstructed, whatever else is going to be involved, because we're already talking about paving a parking lot. And if all we had to do was put pavement on a section of the street, then it's really hard to justify just the parking lot. If the street itself needs reconstruction and there's major money to go into it, council needs to be aware of that before we make a decision. So if somebody would, at the end of the presentation, want to make that combined motion, I think that's very appropriate to let them know that we are looking into it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chestnut, actually, Bill Chestnut, was out to see me 2 or 3 different times about this road. And he wasn't aware that we had an asset management plan. He just thought we just picked roads, you know, and looked after that. So he had a little bit more understanding after that. So, but I encouraged him to form a delegation and come and talk to us. And so I think that's fair.
Okay, can I get a mover and seconder for adjournment, please? Moved by Councilor Deal, second by Councilor Morrison. The time now being 4:59 PM, the meeting do now adjourn. All in favor?